afternoon. You're on Silent Running, a show semi-procedurally documenting the closing of the Exchange Dublin Cooperative. I'm your Raffish host, James Van de Val, and with me are two of the most dedicated and well-known Exchange volunteers. And by two, I mean one at the moment. Conor McQuillan, kind of mostly spotlighted throughout the kind of Exchange closing period between kind of late January and now. And a fine mahawk to you. I promised I'd never say that. I'm sorry. I didn't want to use mahawk.
I'm not sure what that means.
Mahawk, you don't remember that? It's the Stonecutters episode of The Simpsons.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's a joke about... It's the idea that... what were they ripping off there specifically?
I'm not sure.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's just meant to be kind of like a secret code of a secret society. The
Yeah.
idea that we are a secret society, which we're not. Okay, so...
Officially.
Yeah, not yet. So this is the show kind of going through the period... Well, at least I wanted it to be something that documents the period of the Exchange where you've lost your space. The place you had in Temple Bar is now gone, and you're in a consistent debate with Temple Bar Cultural Trust, who closed you, to kind of get it back. So you don't need to worry about that microphone for the moment. We're a bit at odds and ends here. It's actually a fantastic setup, and I'll say thanks to Radio Mate who are hosting us. We have Dan and Jack here because
Thank
we're
you.
in Block T, and it's just we're on top of this. What is this? How old is
A
this?
table.
Yeah, but I was going to say though, it looks really old. I was saying earlier, but if you put a bureau over there, this is a lovely little kind of desk. It's a lovely office area. So anyway, Conor, I kind of wanted to start with number one question. I'll kind of introduce the show as it goes along, but what was the Exchange?
So the Exchange was a former furniture shop, which had been turned into a somewhat idyllic, aspirational, creative arts centre that people just came and sang and danced and read poetry and told jokes and occasionally answered emails and opened the door to other people to come in.
Okay, right. And you see, in its inception, I remember it was the three people that were named to me were Jonah
Jonah King,
Dylan Haskins, and the third one would be...
Andreas Kinder von Novlik.
I'm just glad you pronounced it. I'll just hand that over to you.
It could be von Kinder. I
Yeah.
got those two mixed up.
And with its inception, though, was it to be a gig space? Was it not?
The inception was to be a kind of mixed-use visual arts and gig space.
Okay.
With the idea being that they had a few different functions that they saw weren't being catered for in the city centre.
Yeah.
And because they only had one building, they thought, let's fit it in the one thing.
Yeah.
So it could be a gig space in the evenings, but it could also be a gallery space where, essentially it's a lived-in gallery. There are events running alongside visual art on the walls.
So it kind of that's not really where it went when I joined in, because I should mention that I was a volunteer at the Exchange in late 2010, early 2011, and it was not at all a gig space at that point. We'd had occasional bands coming in playing past the hour they were allowed to play in a space that possibly, can I say, wasn't licensed to play loud music at that hour?
Well, it both wasn't licensed and wasn't appropriate because there wasn't soundproofing in the building, and there are residential apartments upstairs.
Yeah.
But it was a very good space for somebody to play an acoustic or jazz, or occasionally there were sort of avant-garde electronic gigs there. So there were, without the loud, heavy music that there had previously been, the first 3 or 4 gigs were pretty much all like gigs.
Yeah.
They could have been in Waylands and they probably had enough sound gear to fill Waylands. But the space was never appropriate for that, so that was shut down pretty quickly, and the space in some ways was lucky to survive that mistake, and then realised, okay, we need to turn down the volume, but we can still have music. And the space, even more recently, has hosted gigs as part of the Hardworking Class Heroes and the Love the City New Year's Eve Festival, kind of walking tours gigs where there'd be small, short acoustic sets for 20 to 30 minutes at it's kind of a programmed trail of venues. So the idea is that you either go from one to the other, or that when a particular band is on, say in a bookshop,
Yeah.
down the street from the Exchange, and you can go to the two of them.
So a tour, yeah, basically. Yeah.
So, with the volume turned down, it can still be a musical space, and it's actually just about the right size for an acoustic gig, because it's intimate enough to get sound to everyone in the building, but it's big enough to get a reasonable crowd of 40, 50 people comfortably enjoying the music.
Yeah, well, comfortably that's another way of putting it. I mean, we had beanbags in the space before. We've had couches. We've had neither.
The couches weren't that comfortable.
Yeah, they weren't that comfortable. No, a lot of things were donated to the space. So it was quite small. I mean, in terms of area, what's the feet? What's the footage?
I'm really bad at the square footage because I do metrics.
Okay, yeah.
The biggest space was, I think, 7 meters by 11, so 77 square meters, and then there were 2 smaller spaces, probably about 20 to 25 square meters each.
Yeah. Okay.
So all told, maybe 115 to 130 square meters, whatever that is in square foot.
Yeah, it was pretty small, but they made good use of it. I mean, the thing that I recall is that the events that were running when I came in was, as I mentioned, gigs. There was a lot of those, usually pushed towards Friday and Saturday, when people want gig time, but they're they're from schools, they have pretty much nowhere else that's going to take them, and all they have to do is step in this weird collective system on a Wednesday and say, can I play some music, and maybe I'll bring some money, and that kind of put them through. And the rest of the events on the weekdays were dance classes, all sorts of dance classes. Usually women run, very young girls. Possibly
young.
a lot of them from Southern America, or being South America specifically. And yeah, no, some of them were quite young.
This isn't how I remember this.
Because you didn't come in until about a year later.
Okay.
This is when I just came in, and there was a lot of dance classes associated with the Spates, because Capoeira had linked us with a number of other groups who would then come in, not just to do their Capoeira, but set up their own separate classes. Like there was even like at one point like a Lindy Hop class, I think, there, or something in the 50s. And so it was quite diverse and cool, but it was still just dancing. The kind of artistic element of proper exhibitions and a kind of a roll around of all these different types of avant-garde music creation was yet to happen. That wasn't really that was not on the forecasts.
I mean, speaking of forecasts, there was the different fronts come into the space. Different communities and different people with different interests find the space at different times over the 5 years, and being truly democratic and responsive to the needs of the people who were there at that time, the function and use of the place changed as people wanted it to. So if everyone there wanted dance classes, the calendar became full with dance classes. And as you say, that was pretty varied. That was capoeira, wasa wasa, West African dance, salsa, mambo, tango, and
I just remember Mambo.
Yeah, and
that's so easy.
And then there were Greek folk dances, and that morphed into sort of pan-European folk dances.
All in the same hour.
Yeah, where it was Polish and Greek and Italian, and even Breton dances being taught by Polish people.
Wow.
So there was a really wonderful kind of mix of things, and that actually would be on Thursday and Friday evening, so that was kind of a nice relaxed way to end the week. There was this kind of lilting traditional European music, and there was kind of a nice
and there was some
atmosphere.
Eastern persuasions as well, and then you had a lot more Latin, and but except that when I started to leave the space, what I remember was that it was a singing choir. It was a kind of a very Christian. What were they called again? It was
that was called Sacred Harp.
Sacred Harp, that's it. Yeah.
So Sacred Harp, the idea was that the voice is the sacred harp of the soul or whatever, and
some stupid.
It was some shit. Like
I think
soul.
Milton twisted it around anyway.
It basically seems to have come from the white Presbyterian gospel background in America. So very austere music, not the kind of gospel that you hear in the Blues Brothers or the kind of infectious.
It's not Peter, Paul, and Mark. Let's put it that way.
It's not the infectious gospel. It's the austere, serious, soulful in the more medieval rather than 70s.
Yeah, I mean, it was stepping almost onto what arias would be later on in operatic history, because they had to do a lot of the ahs and oohs. It was all vowel, basically expensive vowels. You pushed up. It was high range voweling. That's what they were doing. I mean, that's what I remember, and it was really annoying. It was so hard to concentrate in that atmosphere. But back onto what
well, interestingly, we kind of joked occasionally that because it was just so difficult for somebody to hang out in the space whenever that was on.
Yeah.
Because they sang at the top of their voice.
They had to. It was part of it.
They really threw the voices out there, and it was a very mixed ability choir, which was great for the openness of it to new people coming in, but it meant that harmonising was difficult with people who didn't have trained voices. So if you were so inclined, it could be annoying to listen to. Especially if you're a kid who usually listens to, I don't know, dubstep or goth or whatever.
Yeah.
So they would clear out of the space whenever that went on. So we used to joke that it was actually the best antidote.
It was, yeah.
It was kind of a buffer around the space. A kid-free zone. If you wanted to have adult-only events, you needed to have Sacred Harp in there.
Then have
just
Sacred Harp
beforehand.
singing hyper-Christian aria-like music at high pitches, and you'll push out kids.
But in fairness to them, I mean, it went on in exchange for a long time, and actually really successfully connected to groups in Cork and England. And they would have weekends where people would come over, or they would go over to different
I remember
cities.
that part, yeah.
So it really tapped into a growing community in the UK and Ireland, and actually, whenever it left the exchange, I think 2012, it had about 10 months, and then realised that the group was big enough to get its own space in a more regular booking, because obviously within exchange, with any regular booking, we ask for flexibility, that one-off events are still able to book even.
Yeah, and if they'll be somewhat synergetic to other events and play at the same time. And they did find people were very good about that.
Yeah, Sacred Harp in particular were wonderful about that. The organizer, Shane, I can't thank enough for the number of times that he was very flexible about things. But they realised that they had come to a certain point where they needed a regular fixed time in the week that was definitely going to happen, so that even if somebody didn't come to Sacred Harp for a few weeks, they knew exactly what time to come back to.
Yeah.
So they went actually to Trinity College in House 2, I think. Maybe it's House 5. Is the singing rooms and kind of choir practice rooms in the...
It's expensive rental though, isn't it? I mean,
I'm not sure how much they pay, or if anything. It might be a connection through the music department in the college. I know that a number of people in Sacred Harp were actually relatively well-known musicians. I suppose most notably the Laptop Orchestra of Dublin, which is a group that has performed most recently in Temple Bar Galvin Studios on Valentine's Day. They're a group who kind of mix recordings and live ambient sounds produced through laptops and sound desks and stuff.
Yeah.
And a few of their members were involved in the Sacred Harp group, so I'd say they were reasonably well connected to find another space whenever they had to. And Trinity, in I think it's House 5, provides a very central location for them to meet up and rehearse on Friday evenings.
Okay, well, so if anyone wants gig space, decent choir space, Trinity, House 5, if you're connected, push it in there.
If you're connected and if you're very much on a choral or classical or orchestral bent, it's actually one of the wonderful things about walking out of college on a Thursday or Friday evening, or the evenings where choirs and orchestras were practicing, that you would hear that the music reverberate around House 5.
Never had that experience.
Well,
being one of many thousands, if not millions of people who've never been to Trinity.
Yeah, well, I suppose that I used to live in Front Square, so it was literally a couple of doors away, and you'd hear the orchestral music in the evenings. It was lovely.
For your Inspector Morse moment at the end of the episode.
Yeah, as I was smalling the events of the day and sipping on red wine or whatever.
Yeah, or it wouldn't be red wine from Morse. It would be heavy ale. So really, though, that's one of the many events that had to... I mean, that's one of the many things that the exchange was able to incubate.
Yes.
That was able to grow.
Groups grow and develop and then move on. Yeah.
And then a lot of them were kind of left in the lurch when you guys closed down. So that's kind of what I want to jump back to before we get too encyclopedic with what you know. You guys have been closed. Can you give me the exact date? Because I was going to guess around February 2nd or 3rd is when you were told to shut. But I'll have you document this.
Timeline of when we were told what... In broad terms,
okay.
January 21st, I think, was the third Thursday in January, or maybe,
It's really important
maybe
now.
the 4th.
Get it down.
I don't know. So I think it was the 21st of January. There was a public meeting with some residents and neighbours, and we'd been told to go along to that because it was kind of a neighbourhood meeting where we were going to talk about issues in the neighbourhood, and. At that meeting, it was announced by Ray Yates and Manic Flynn that they had decided to suspend the licence of Exchange Dublin. And really, there wasn't a huge amount more detail as to what that meant. And actually, one of the residents inquired quite directly as to what that meant and whether or not that meant that they were going to close immediately or be given another space. Sorry, whether we were going to close immediately or be given another space in the interim, and what was going to happen to all the groups that used the space.
Yeah.
Because they were not the target of the action of suspending the exchange. The point of suspending the exchange wasn't to leave people in the lurch, it was to try and provide a kind of a stopgap or a break for everyone in the area, that if there was antisocial behaviour, the Gardaí could go in and...
This would be the litmus test in a way.
To try and
acid or base, so really dodgy kids.
To try and do a somewhat controlled experiment.
Yeah.
Ideally you'd have, area without exchange or without guards, then area with the exchange without guards, and then the area with guards and no exchange.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to have all three of those scenarios because... it's unlikely that the residents are going to agree to a period where there's no Gardaí as well as no exchange.
There's a limit to this test.
Yeah, it's not going to be fully scientific.
Yeah.
But the idea was that there would be a break without the exchange so people could establish a baseline. And more optimistically, perhaps, to separate exchange from antisocial behaviour and see if there was antisocial behaviour continuing in Temple Bar, which has been to a degree, because Temple Bar is still what it is, and whether or not exchange could be buffered from that, or perhaps given a fresh start in a few months' time.
Yeah.
So, that's the optimistic interpretation.
Yes.
That depends on certain actions happening, and we'll see how that pans out. So we were told after the meeting by Maddox Flynn that he'd give us a call and explain everything.
There's a long pause there. What's going on?
A few days later, we received an email on the Monday morning, so this is 4 days later, from me. It's asking that we hand out the keys on Friday, that the license for exchange was going to be suspended for 3 months, and that we should hand back the keys and vacate the premises. Which again left a lot of questions. Not particularly well answered.
You were getting orders, and you were asking questions with these orders, and not following the orders, which was what was seeming to be. I mean, that's how I interpreted the messages or emails from certain parties in DCC, or more specifically, Temple Bar Cultural Trust.
Well, sometimes a bit of conflict is better than submission.
Yes.
And we felt that giving us 4 days.
Bismarck would never agree, but yeah.
Actually, that's from me. It's a Twitter account.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. That's wow, thrown to bits. Alright, Conor, I'll allow you to laugh that off. Bit of conflict can be good, I agree. Except in this case, it was a problem with interpreting the why of being pushed out.
Well, the why was unclear at that meeting. The exact why, I mean, we basically spent a few weeks with the Culture Trust and City Council trying to find out what exactly their plan was for how this was going to pan out. To which the answer was, well, you come back with the plan. We've done this much. We have closed the exchange and put more Gardaí into the area, so any antisocial behaviour in the area is being cleared up, and you have a chance to come back to us with a proposal that seems to address the problems, or might not, in which case, good luck.
Yeah, do what you want. Come back with anything.
Yeah.
We'll have to serve you to a certain degree as public officers, but you're gone. That's what. See how I interpret that is, we've closed Amsterdam. It's closed. This free zone is dead. The kids have been thrown and peddled out. The drug dealers are gone, and your aggregate part of it is we snuffed it. We hate you. I'm saying a lot of things that seem indifferent, but I don't know how else to interpret. Because I mean, you're saying that you didn't know the why, okay? But there is a definitely easy part to it. You can interpret a certain amount of legalese and political talk from anyone in the public office, no matter how low down the public office may be, even if it is certain councils. But I think you can. Well, that's what I'm saying. That's not what the exchange is saying. That's what I'm saying. But it seems to be that you're saying you weren't targeted in a vicious way in the end. I mean, because you're saying now it's more that you were taken out as part of this controlled experiment to see were you the aggregate of antisocial behaviour that was already present in Temple Bar.
Yeah.
And that period is going through whatever it's going through. I don't know how the numbers are showing, but I'm sure the agar is full up with lots of different colonies of bacteria as it always was.
Okay, so at the meeting on January 21st, or maybe 23rd, I might have got the date wrong, I said that this was, in some ways, a simple solution to a complex problem. There was more to it than closing the exchange. And I think Council knows that, because they didn't just close the exchange. They closed the exchange, and for a couple of weeks, or a few nights at the very least, turned Cowes Lane and the area around it into a kind of ground zero, where there was a significant Gardaí presence. Now, a lot of that was to reassure the residents and maybe the volunteers that this was being taken seriously, and that there were serious efforts being made to hopefully give us a clear run at things in a few months' time, or to see how things are without the exchange. I suppose one of the handy phrases for it that we used internally was that maybe this is an example of rinse and repeat, that you simply closed it down for a while, clear out the area, and in terms of having literally very few people on the street. The area is very quiet now during the day, partially because a few shops were closed. So there's a very clear baseline now as to what the area is like during the day without the exchange, and without 3 shops that have closed in the last 3 months, and with a more significant Garda presence. And being optimistic, we can say to ourselves and to the residents, okay, that gives everyone a breathing space, and it gives exchange, if it reopens, a clear run of things. That suddenly we have a more level playing field, and we're not fighting against the overspill from Temple Bar and the fact that people on the street drink and get up to no good and are annoying neighbours.
Yeah.
If that element is being cleared out of the area, then maybe the resident can see that having a cultural space where people come to dance and talk and loads of different things isn't necessarily a cause in any sense of people drinking on the street, drumming, making noise, screaming, shouting, that kind of thing.
It's Temple Bar.
Yes.
I just
Exchange
I
is
have to
not
say
the
that loudly.
Exchange did not cause these things. And I think people recognise that. This is not new behaviour that suddenly came into the city centre whenever Exchange opened 5 years ago. This is a continuation of an ongoing problem that Gardaí and different council services have with different generations of kids and people into their 30s and 40s who hang around Temple Bar and are a real problem for City Council to deal with, because you're essentially trying to work with people at the point at which things have, they've slipped through a number of nets and potential.
The edifices haven't caught them. The epistems aren't.
Yes.
They don't belong to them.
Yes, they've fallen down the ravine into a pretty bad situation, a lot of them. And at the point where you're trying to deal with people and get them off the street,
Yeah.
it's a very intensive process for City Council services. And I can appreciate it's very difficult for them to deal with people in an emergency situation where, somebody, say a kid who's 24, 25, has dropped out of school, never intended to go to college, but didn't finish programs in the VECs or different youth reach programs, aren't in any sort of training or education. I suppose the phrase that's used in the UK a lot is NEETs, not employment, education or training. So you're effectively trying to work backwards. And we do a lot of missed opportunities over the previous 10, 20 years in that person's life. That's a very difficult problem, but it's not one that Exchange can move in for causing. And people will recognise that.
But you did highlight it. You existed to reflect it.
Well, that probably is a large part of it. The big windows in the Exchange suddenly mean that you see who's in there. And nothing is hidden.
It's a gallery space. You can see through all these large windows.
Yeah,
If people have been on the street before. South Exchange Street, isn't it?
Exchange Street upper and the corner with Essex Street west.
Essex Street, yeah.
If somebody has caused problems on the street, there are two ways of dealing with them. Well, a few ways. You can, you could banish them from the country, but we seem to have given that up 100 years ago.
Yeah,
you can throw them in jail, but that's not working, and people realise that, and it's important to try and catch people before the point where they get sucked into a life of crime. Or you can provide diversionary pathways for them to make better choices. And that has to be done with a lot of support through Garda youth programs and that kind of thing. And I don't see that Exchange made that more difficult. If anything, it's actually, my hope is that Exchange is somewhere that is open and accessible enough for people to get involved in, once they've gone beyond the point where they're in trouble or need help to get back on their feet. They can't simply, go through life on their own. They're going to need support, and they're going to need to find social institutions that are open to their involvement and for them to have a stake and say and feel part of something. And Exchange, if that can be something that we provide in the long term, fantastic.
It's basically a non-state funded version, though, of something that was, I was there, that was not rehabilitating anybody, but certainly giving function and daily advice and input into a democratic system to a number of kids who were completely left out of not only their homes, like kicked out by destructive parents or backgrounds. I'm not even, this is not conjecture, I know it. And the school system, I'm not going to say failed, it didn't fail them, they failed it. Let's say that's quite a proportion of it, but whatever.
All the F's on the...
And if they're not spending their days graffitiing and tagging, which is just this kind of rebellious, known, urban subcultural thing to do when you're angry or angst, which of course they were.
Vandalism is the ultimate expression of somebody who doesn't have a stake.
Yeah, exactly. And that's for a long time, this was the biggest problem with a lot of businesses. They hated the tagging, they hated the kind of the art that came with it. And in fairness, a lot of them were terrible. That came with graffiti. And then these kids ended up with us.
Yeah.
They ended up coming in all the time. They ended up drinking free tea and coffee and getting a place to... ostensibly they're freeloading initially. Everybody goes to someplace to freeload. That's just nature. But before they knew it, they were taking part in the collective system on Wednesdays. They were coming up to ask for gig space. They were coming in to ask to be volunteers. They were getting towards the point where we're giving them keys. When I say kids, I mean adults. I want to specifically say no kid under 18 was ever given a key. But there were people who went in when they were 16 and they were there till they were 19.
Yeah, effectively grew up and grew into the space and really felt that this was something they could be a part of. And I suppose that got to the real democratically managed space that people have a say and feel like their input is valuable. And once people feel they have part ownership and that they are valued within the space, they will do their utmost to protect and work for it.
They have something to protect and work for is the important thing. Yeah. And they could get a taste of what it is. Like, we tasted democracy again. Do you understand what I mean? No one else gets to taste it. Like, there's nowhere else out there you get to have democratic representation anymore.
Yeah.
You don't really think about it. Where do you get to feel that?
It's very difficult to find any other structure where democracy is localized to the point where there is a real cause and effect between anyone.
Yeah, it's directly locused
something.
into a circle. The locus is a circle of people that you then see go about and carry out. Well, okay, some of which will go about and carry out actions that you put forth, as well as yourself, and you can change something.
And you have the possibility to be actually part of a change and part of a constructive change in the way exchange was running, or trying to do things better and differently and improve things, or to be part of a creative project that brings out the better side of people, that allows them to be, engaging constructively in something and feel like what they're doing is something that they can feel part of.
Yeah, it basically had meaning in whatever way you want to take that. As spiritually as you want to take it, or as practically, or as you want to. It depends how you define the word. Okay,
yeah,
but
self-esteem, I suppose, is the one that a lot of youth clubs and youth services would say that is the real nub of a lot of their activity, is giving somebody the space and the opportunity to build their own self-esteem.
Yeah.
And I think the exchange, while lacking many sports to do it properly, actually gave people a space to build that for themselves. And the sports, while informal, I felt were very real. That people did feel like they were being listened to, and that if there was an idea that the young person came to one of the volunteers with, that a huge amount of encouragement and help was given towards that, and whatever we could do in terms of buying stuff or finding the right people for somebody to work with, that was in place and that was working. Whenever exchange worked best, that was a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I came in, I think it was around, as I said, it was late 2010, early 2011, I think I came in, and it was a year before you had come along as part of a volunteer training meeting. Right. And when we were in there, that was, myself and a friend of mine, Dan, came into it, and it was, by the way, I don't know, I introduced you, I'm calling, I introduced myself with my full name, just want to make sure that's already done.
At the start of the show, or 3 years ago in exchange?
No, at the start of the show, you weren't there. Although it might be on minute to minute and everything. Myself and I came in looking for what was essentially a social clinic. Some place that could rehabilitate us in such a way that we could talk to people again. And school systems and colleges weren't really great for that. There was, people call it cliquiness, but really it's just that there's sub-tens. There are different small subcultures that evolve in colleges very typically, that then grow into small pools, and they rehabilitate themselves and they recapitulate the same problem that came in secondary school, which is, weird hierarchies and based around, confused Darwinist principles, because I'm not saying that's what he would believe, but that's what they thought. And then you had the strong men, the jocks, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. That's what happened. And colleges also, particularly DIT, had a terrible run of its societies, and I'm unhappily say that on any record. The societies were shit at the time, so there was nowhere really we could go. I mean, Dan was he was in Trinity. He'd come out of Trinity actually, doing a law degree, and I was doing computing, and it was just, we were pretty isolated. So when we went in the first night, it was really, really dark. They weren't turning the lights on. I can't remember why. And it was a Friday. There was loads of food. Not great food, but there was loads of spaghetti bolognese mashes into these like little tubs that they carried in, and some of which was cooked by the great Robin Cafola, who was he was at the time actually was a pretty good cook, and he's using his Italian heritage to cook spaghetti bolognese. I'm sure they'd be proud. And
that's a one spicy meat.
There were no spicy meatballs because everybody in there had some weird Pratket version of Indian food where they didn't want any spices because they could up your blood pressure or whatever, and you talk to Tom about it. they had pretty basic foods, but they had chocolates and things. And I'd met a couple of people there, and and Tom was one of them. They were just really nice. They were just really open. They wanted you to be as involved as possible. They may not have followed through with that in the future, but it didn't matter. The first impression made everything, especially to someone who is like hypersensitive to every shift in someone's posture and appearance. And like if you're particularly nebbish and nerdy, you are always aware of how people are taking you, and that makes you more and more cloistered in your appearance, and you become and then like there's a big, how do I put it, like feedback loop where your nervousness makes them nervous, and that's not what happened. They were possibly because they were very happy before I got there from some other injection of fun. But when I got there, it was just great. It was really lovely. And most importantly, I came back and I was able to take part in the meetings and say yay or nay to shit I didn't even know about, which just was great.
I think that was one of the really interesting the really interesting aspects of exchange, that actually it attracts a certain type of person. It doesn't really matter so much like what country or background you're from, but there's a certain mentality that goes into feeling like exchange is a home for you.
Yeah.
And the week that we were closing, I by coincidence was reading a book called Kafka on the Shore.
Yeah, I know, Murakami.
We can make lots of jokes in the next episode about the Kafkaesque elements to lots of this. But Kafka on the Shore starts off with a young boy running away from home, and he starts talking to somebody on a bus, as he's running away from home.
Yeah.
And they get talking, him and the young girl, and the young girl references this Japanese proverb. Probably, has translations in different cultures as well. But it basically says that a companion in traveling, a companion in travel, compassion in life. The idea being that if somebody is open to simply striking up a conversation with somebody on the train or bus, that they're more likely to be compassionate and open-hearted in life, and that they're more likely to be an open personality. And I feel like lots of the different people who have come into exchange, particularly people from far-flung places like South Korea, Japan, Brazil, and Mexico, have found that there's a certain openness in exchange that really welcomes and embraces them at a time when they're feeling particularly vulnerable in a new city where they don't know people, and exchange kind of becomes something for them to latch onto, a social institution, to use that term again, that they can feel part of and fit in relatively easily, because it's so easy for everyone to fit in as long as they don't play drums at night. And that, I think,
as long as I fit in just till 11 o'clock and stop fitting in.
Well, I think, although the book really, the week that we were closing, was a nice, fancy, magic realism escape, there were aspects of the book where it discussed ideas in classical literature and different proverbs from
That's
Japan
what magic
and
realism
Greece.
tends to be, is a concoction of lots of different classical stories.
Yeah.
So
And that was a kind of a really nice thought-provoking element to it, and it's something that I've actually spoken to with people from countries who found exchange, and they kind of think, well, this is fantastic, this is not what I expected at all.
Yeah.
And I kind of said, well, part of that is because you're the right person.
Yeah.
You had to be the kind of person who wanted to leave your home country and go off on an adventure and find new places. So there's
Or run from your home country and go off and find any connection with a human being.
Yeah, but there's no
Either way you frame those crossroads.
and there's an implicit openness to finding new connections, and I suppose one of the things that exchange that we, probably both of us, if I'm not speaking for you too much,
No, please
value most is that incidental connection that you make with people, that you meet people you didn't expect to meet, that you find and discover and talk about things that you didn't plan to find or discover or talk about, but that element of, I suppose, of kind of incidental coincidence or happy coincidence sometimes, where people find other people interested in the same topic, or find people to work on in a particular small creative project. That really is probably one of the more valuable but hard to reproduce things about the exchange. And I think for me that kind of gets to what I most enjoyed about it, that you see the kind of interchange or the exchange between different people from different countries or different backgrounds, and that they somehow find areas of meaningful connection.
They find parallels. We meld parallels together all the time. Because once you're there, and as you said, once you've stayed for longer than 5 minutes and not run away, there's something indicative about you that wants to connect to someone else. And what I mean to say is that there's you can get particularly philosophical about this, but what a lot of institutions have done today in a kind of let's not say it's not corporatized too much anymore, but there's a post-corporatized world with the leftover of the kings, okay? And then there's Ireland is not really made up of too many of them, but we depend on them.
Yeah.
We're made up of small and medium businesses, but even those businesses have taken on the globalized affront of everyone having a service industry tagline and a name and a suit and everyone's uniformed the same way.
We're not wearing suits.
Yeah, we're not, thankfully.
Just let the listener
No, I'm
know.
naked. Yeah, but so what happened was, for me, that you go through these, particularly in college systems as well, you have student unions and things that are functioned to deal with the public or deal with the masses of the students, but in the end they barely have any connection to any of the administrative layers.
Yeah.
And most people who get into college politics anyway are just trying to get their CV rounded up so they can get their political line in order for later politics, and it's got nothing to do with actual use of what politics should be about. Is dialectic with the people. It's dialectic with the people with its power structures. That's really where politics matters, and in that sense politics is everything. But what I found was that dealing with any system, even if it's just getting on a bus to talking to someone in college or asking for recommendations on a paper, everybody was systematized. They were all working under a different tagline or regime head. They always had some sort of thing to cater to. They weren't ever honest, and I was part of that problem too. I was perfectly dishonest. I was presenting my faces to different people, like the Freudian masks were everywhere, and we were all trying to gain on one another, but we weren't even sure what it was we were getting. Anyone who I worked with in college or talked to in DIT, particularly Kevin Street, they're all middle management. They're not going to go anywhere. They're just going to continually build up a nice pension, and that's it. So it's not like they were trying to gain anything on you. They're just to keep the lines of communication fractured and broken so that you keep doing your essays and you keep doing your work, but don't ask too many questions about how it is we're marking it or why it is we're marking it this way. You know this. They even have a marking scheme, but they never follow it. And what I felt was that everyone I dealt with was part of some they were just subtended or just another kind of a part of an autocratic institution. They were just attached to something in some way to then field me as another number or as just another person who's coming through as a customer. And then when you go to the exchange, there is an implicit want to have a human essence. Do you know what I mean? Like to the philosophical idea of what human essence is, they want to actually feel what it's like to talk to another human being with radical honesty and not have to deal with consistent layers of bullshit. And there's very few places that do that. It's really odd because even when you don't want to be that, we're so trained in to that kind of capitalized structure. I mean, it's not a bash against capitalism, but we're so trained into that structure that even when we have a house to ourselves and with families, we still talk in that way, which is diplomatically, walking the middle road, never stretching too far into any one political zone that's dangerous, and never saying too many bad words. And then when we get the Irish attitude going, it's only because we've had enough drinks and enough chicken wings to start saying really radical things. That's what I've found, and that's certainly my experience of life thus far, even if it's not true for in any great proselytized way for anyone else. That's just my experience, and the exchange wasn't that. The exchange was, you could talk about anything, and there's interdiscipline going on all the time. You're a great polemical body because everybody knows some layer of some discipline that they can then engage with you upon and then get into a dialectic, and that's just nowhere else did that. And I came with that certain want from that in academia, but I was never given it. So the exchange kind of did that for me. But I think that for a lot of people, you're right, it's they want to connect, and they've come from far away, and it's not just because they're lonely when they're here, but they came probably to Dublin, or they came venturing throughout the world because there was something already missing. I personally think is sure, they want to learn English and get the market language down because it's important. But
it's more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they want to connect with human beings. It's such a stupid and completely such a fairy thing to say, but it's actually what it came down to.
Yeah, it's actually really important.
Yeah. We don't just say it to fill in funny moments with really sad moments in television shows like Arrested Development. It actually is important to communicate with people. It's actually nice. We've just forgotten to enhance and talk about it because it's not part of market schema. It's just not part of what we're driven to talk about. So I found that systemization was really annoying, and that's what the exchange didn't have. But anyway, we're going to move on to a moment where we're going to talk about, you're going to tell me how you're running the exchange now.
Okay.
Because I have no idea how it's running, but I'm going to play a little song here, go into a break. You can go out and have some more fags.
Cool.
I'm going to... cigarettes, and I'm going to have a glass of water. So it's going to be Lou Reed, Satellite of Love, and I'll speak to you in a moment. Cool.
Things like that drive me out of my mind. I watched it for a little while. I like to watch things on TV. Satellite of love. Satellites gone way up to Mars. Soon it'll be filled with parking cars. I watched it for a little while. I love to watch things on TV. Satellite of love, satellite of love, satellite of love, satellite of. I've been told that you've been bold with Harry, Mark, and John. Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday through Thursday with Harry, Mark, and John. Satellites gone up to the skies. Things like that drive me out of my mind. I watched it for a little while. I love to watch things on TV. Satellite of love, satellite of love, satellite of love, satellite of. Satellite
And you're back on Silent Running. Hey, Connor.
Hi.
You're back and liquored up, sufficiently watered.
Yeah, I got water, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I was saying.
A very tickly cough.
Yeah, no, I understand. Absolutely. I'm tickling in lots of sections. Anyway, I said I was going to come back and we're going to talk now about how you guys are running the exchange without a building.
Well, it's been interesting.
Yeah.
Although there was some precedent for it. About 18 months ago, a few people from Cardiff, actually it might have been Mother Tittle, a place outside Cardiff, came in and talked to us about how they ran. They just happened to be in Dublin and had sought out exchange in a few other places and wanted to kind of drop in and talk about how they run as opposed to us. So they, sometime in the recent past, did have a space, but lost it, and so they came up with a different way of running, where basically there would be a collective that would run primarily through an online group, and once people proposed a project, there would then be a sign-up. So, there'd be a fairly flat structure. Anyone can propose a group, a project, or a pop-up, or whatever, and they put up the idea. 5 people sign up to it, and once they have 5 or more, they can start to meet and actually organise the details of this and find out where they can find venues. So they've done a series of pop-up events around Cardiff. Essentially the same kinds of activity that the exchange produce, sometimes themed around particular national days or holidays or whatever in times of the year, but sometimes just purely gigs and kind of creative exhibitions alongside events as part of a launch thing. So they've kind of lost the space but found a different way of working. And so that was a model that I tried to say to the others, well, we could think about that.
Yeah.
For the interim, that we still try and organise some things, but, look beyond the borders of the 4 walls of the exchange.
Or the physical realities into the digital.
I think actually,
world.
Given the shape of the building, there
It's
was
not 4
6 walls.
6 walls, yeah. I remember this.
Yeah. And
And 9 circles below that. That's a bad joke, I apologise.
all floating on the back of a turtle on the river of life.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody will understand that.
Yeah, although I do think there's potentially an argument that...
Hell is below exchange, I know.
No. Okay, so the one creative thing I ever organised in the exchange, in conjunction with
I've organised many.
In conjunction with a former volunteer called Martin, we had this joke idea, because I stumbled upon an article about the fact that where exchange is located is actually where it is believed one of the very earliest Viking settlements might be.
Yeah.
Basically, the street between the Essex Street and the river was essentially reclaimed land. It was very muddy. The original black pool that Dublin comes from.
Yeah.
And the Vikings were... Sorry.
Jesus, really?
The Vikings were that sick. The Vikings were renowned for setting up settlements at the juncture of a river and a tributary going towards it.
Yeah.
So I think where we are, it's either the Pottle or the Daughter, I think.
The Pottle would be the Pottle, wouldn't it? Daughter's way further back.
Yeah. Okay. So the Pottle roughly met the Liffey roughly where exchange is now.
Yeah.
And the thesis behind the article, which I think was written by let me see. I think it was actually one of the guys who was involved in the coup, Carl MacDonald, I think was his name. We can find a link to the blog post and put that with the article.
Yeah.
Or put this.
Yeah, put on top of the podcast. Yeah, we're on a WordPress link.
But basically, I theorised that maybe this is where Dublin started.
Yeah.
Way back 1,000.
No, this is something it's actually quite well known by the residents.
Yeah.
Actually, they all knew that, and the spot is believed to be like one of the first that was like archaeologically marked, but like back in the early 1900s, where possibly just at the cusp of it, was the point just outside the exchange front door, at that road there, at that square point. That's meant to be the X that marks the spot. That's meant to be the location where you can find markings of a settlement.
And down the street you have this old star on Exchange Street Lower, which unfortunately the development around it is pretty much hidden behind a large metal gate, which is usually obscured by bins. So unfortunately we have this architectural gem hidden 20 feet below street level, totally inaccessible and unviewable usually, and completely hidden. And thanks to an incident about 18 months ago now in the Exchange where the floor was flooded, we thought we would try and combine these two things with a large metal cylinder that one a volunteer had saved from a dumpster or something.
Just explain that you do have a cough.
Yeah,
at the
I do
moment.
really have a cough. This is not
some joke about a lack of a cough button or something. he has a cough.
I've been trying to get rid of it for about a month. So basically, we had the metal cylinder sitting in a corner of the gallery, and
I did not know about this.
yeah, and we filled it up about halfway with the water, and it was kind of murky and black inside. And I put up some explanatory notes on the wall to say that actually the water had come up due to capillary action, that we had tried to tunnel under the Exchange to find these lost architectural, archaeological artifacts of Viking settlements, and that we had stumbled upon water, and that the water had come up through the tunnel in capillary action.
Did you explain to that detail?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Did you say that?
There were actually a few paragraphs explaining what capillary action is. Basically, the tension, all tube or pipe between water molecules allows them to basically raise above the water table because the tension between the molecules and the surface is so strong that they can essentially grip and climb up the walls of the pipe.
Yeah. Make sure it pours a vacuum.
Yes, and there was some joking references to Flann O'Brien and the ridiculous nature of
Fair
the
policeman style
explanation.
stuff?
Well, yeah, kind of Selby-ish. So we stole Selby's name and said that he was from the University of where was it? I think it was Northwest Alaska. I can't remember what the name was. There was a pun to that name, but I've forgotten.
Well, his execution is ruined now anyway,
Yes,
so you don't need to worry about
yeah,
it.
it's all gone now. It's all there.
You
But,
had to be there, guys.
Yeah, so that was the one creative thing I did in the place was try and nod to one of my favourite writers, but also a funny incident that happened in the space and been a bit of a calamity whenever the floor flooded because of the burst pipe, and also the location of Exchange and how that is historically significant, but maybe not in a way that is known to many of the people in the Exchange. Why were we talking about that?
Well, we were talking about how you are currently functioning, and you initially said...
Okay, yes.
You initially were saying that you were taking the model that you adopted from this group in Cardiff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that we can try and plan lots of little small pop-up exhibitions or events and
I should just briefly
interventions,
explain
that
as well.
kind of
I'm
thing.
going to have to cut across you here and mention
Yeah.
that the Exchange is because it's a facilitative art space. What it does is that it has a meeting usually every Wednesday between 7 and 9, as well as also having a website, an email address based on Gmail called Bookings,
Yeah.
where people can come and present their ideas to run a function or an event or whatever it may be, even a dance class or workshop. And what you do is you put it through our collective system, who then either say yay or nay. We either all vote for it, or one of us blocks it and we debate it until we can either say yes or absolutely no.
Yeah.
And anybody can sit in on that meeting and take part in saying yes or no to that, which is why it's very Athenian democratic kind of.
Yeah.
That's the line that everyone remembers is
Idyllically
democracy.
democratic.
Yeah. And what's important here is that the model you're talking about, Connor, that you took off this other group to take it to a digital layer is just to continue doing what the Exchange does, which is
Yes.
facilitate different art groups.
Yeah. I think as well, sorry, I think I've remembered the link. What I was saying was that, usually working and volunteering in the Exchange was facilitating somebody else's project. Maybe this interim period was an opportunity for us to try and develop a few of the creative projects or ideas that we've had floating around in our own minds. And that we might try and put our own message out there in terms of creatively saying that this actually is what the volunteer group is about and what we're trying to do is fairly fun, creative, non-threatening community art stuff. Qua the exhibition about the water tunnel that went wrong. Or another one that we tried to get going about 2 years ago, actually. No, last year. Was this Before I Die wall. So basically, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, a number of walls popped up around New Orleans and surrounding cities where people had basically just chalked up on the wall, "Before I die, I want to." And then, written a few lines of that and left blanks and bits of chalk or paintbrushes or whatever, so people could fill in their own answer to what their aspirations are. And we had hoped to do that on either one of the walls or hoardings around different vacant spaces around town or maybe near Exchange. and tried to approach City Council about that. Didn't get very far. And
Just at the door, and you're asked to leave.
so we did it inside. We have a wall at the very back of Exchange that we often paint black. So when that was painted black, it was actually kind of a very handy blackboard. So we just did a chalk thing on the wall.
Yeah.
And some of the responses to that were actually kind of wonderful in how bizarre they were. You know, you have the aspirational stuff. You know, some people want to, you know, travel the world or, you know, see Machu Picchu or whatever, and then somebody else writes underneath that, punch a wheel. So before I die, I want to punch a wheel, or before I die, I want to. I think one of the more
I saw one of them was I want a house.
Yeah.
Which I thought was great.
great, but also
Tragic.
really horribly poignant.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In other ways, and
A lot of them were tragic that way.
Yeah, but the idea is that you give somebody a space to say what they want to say.
Yeah.
And
Maybe
they-
we'll read it.
Yeah, and they can do it anonymously, and it gives an idea of the kind of aspirations that people within the Exchange have. So that we could essentially take the model from the Cardiff group and try and work remotely, I guess, on finding projects to work on.
Yeah.
And putting them together. So a few things have happened, a few haven't. A few of the groups that were in Exchange before closure have found other venues. So the European Folk Dance have found a pub in Smithfield, quite close to here, where they can where they can meet up. I think it's either Thursdays or Fridays in the Tap or the Cobblestone.
Do they
I'm
just
not sure
happen to
which.
find that, or do you network them? Because the Exchange does a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
Where you will network.
Yeah, no, we helped a few of the groups who were struggling to find places. The European Folk Dance were able to find that themselves, and then other groups that we've helped. So the Free Range Kids, that was a monthly meetup for parents and kids who are homeschooled by the parents, and the name Free Range Kids came from the fact they used to do outdoor activities only. So it was essentially Free Range Kids roaming the world.
Yeah.
roaming
Running
the
around,
fields.
growing up before being eaten.
Yeah. So they wanted to do indoor activities, particularly over winter, and then found that they would like to continue working in the Exchange. So we connected them with the Culture Box and St Vincent de Paul. Actually, just the month that we closed, had had the first event. They were going to have a series of monthly meetings for the different Vincent de Paul groups in different colleges around town, where basically people could get together and talk about the issues that they've seen working in homeless shelters or working in repainting social houses, or food runs, or lots of different things that Vincent de Paul do. But this would be a more effective exercise for the people volunteering in Vincent de Paul, that they could talk about their experiences and talk about the fact that these are, pretty wide social problems that they're volunteering in to try and help with. So that was, really interesting thing. We wanted to make sure that even though they'd only been able to have one in the Exchange before closing, it was a really good idea and one that we'd been quite looking forward to working with, if we'd been able to. So we managed to find the Culture Box again. We're willing to facilitate them to continue the monthly meetings. Other things that have continued, we've used the lab on Foley Street to meet every Wednesday. So
Was this the Culture Trust's lab?
No, this is the City Council
City
Arts
Council
Office.
Arts Office, okay.
So the lab and the Arts Office have given us a room for Wednesdays between 6 and 9, so we can continue the central democratic root and heart of the Exchange is that people get together and talk in a room and try and work out their problems or work on creative projects to advance. Then, quite a few other things have managed to find other homes as well, some with our help, some without. So the Irish Body Painting competition that actually last year got a hilarious photograph into the Huffington Post of one of the kids on the skateboard going past a window with this relatively naked woman painted like an alien up against the wall. And it was this fantastic photograph that encapsulates the kind of weirdness and the interaction that Exchange can provide for somebody who
Last
doesn't.
interaction. More zoo, if you ask me.
No, a kid who, to any resident on the street or neighbour would look kind of rough, dressed in a little leather jacket and khaki trousers and kind of rough, and got a skateboard and stuff, that he was actually interested in and attracted by this bizarre, weird image coming out of the window of the Exchange. This one painted like an alien.
Yeah.
And that photograph is a really wonderful moment that was captured and went on to the Huffington Post and a few other newswire websites online.
I'm gonna have to screen grab that now and use that with this pot, or with this, if we can, we use it with the show. It'd be fantastic.
So the Irish
I remember it actually.
Yeah, the Irish Bonnie painting competition last year was a big success. They're very happy with the space, and this year they have grown. So went to the Dragon, the bar on George Street, I think it is. And then Lindy Hop, you mentioned earlier, they were supposed to have a dance event in the Exchange on March 8th. And they actually found the Garda Club on Haddington Street.
Good for them.
Yeah, so no shenanigans that night.
No, not at all.
Other people have kind of gone off to Sean Spree, for example, as host of the Open Cinema, and quite a few of the small groups that would have met over different social and cultural...
Spree being up on Mountjoy Square.
Yeah, Belvedere Court just off Mountjoy Square.
Yeah.
And what else? There are other creative projects, Jaja Studios and Headspace, where different people from the Exchange have still been able to contribute and, be part of a creative space, which, is a huge positive for somebody who doesn't have that opportunity elsewhere.
Yeah. Which they really kind of don't. I mean, there are projects that definitely, if you look at a society when it's run, whether it be a college society or even just something like DCTV up the road, there you can get grants. Formerly up the road, yes, I should say, formerly up the road from where the Exchange formerly was. You can get certain access grants. There are things you can do, whether it be the Arts Council or DCC. You could get a grant for a certain amount of artistic endeavour. Now, I've been inside the process of rating these things. And because I worked briefly with the Arts Council, and I remember having to rate a number of different projects, and just Connor's just having a fit of laughter. I'm quite funny. I had to decide who, I think it was only about 20 something in the end, would get a proportion of money that I'm not allowed to name. Yeah. It's a huge amount of money. And in that process, I recall there was a scheme we had to use. We had our own little rebus of authority, which is someone at the table from the Arts Council, and the rest of us were not. He wasn't allowed to talk to us, although he did. And the rest of us had to then decide, because we were hired from different artistic institutions. I was from the Exchange, other people from different places, to divine from the heavens who on this table of like 90 applicants was going to get a certain proportion of money based on a rank of A to C. So like C's for the lowest, A's for the highest, for 12 grand to 20, let's say, and let's be true, that's 12 grand to 20, maybe more. And I recall that you can go to these places, you can get money, and that you can build up a decent society. You can run it just about whatever way you want within reason, within the law.
Yeah.
And societies in college can have that. I'm not going to deny that there are moments where people have this moment of like, the society's not being built up, but I have money. Like, I can buy office space, I can buy recording equipment. Oh my God, I'm becoming the very institution I'm building. Like, you can have that feeling elsewhere besides the Exchange. It's the Exchange you gave it to people who are incredibly disenfranchised, people who weren't in any of these systems, and people who were thinking about a grant, and as soon as they start to get the forms for a grant, would have to search different internet, go to different internet cafes to print it off. They had no home. Like, these are people who would no place else to go, and there is nothing functioning for them. And even people like me, who felt there was too much of a political schema, or I should say, there was too much of a social political system you had to navigate through to get into a society. You had to meld with the right people and gel with them. You had to know the lines and put it this way. Remember I mentioned Dan earlier on? Dan went into a history society once, and he was told that in the initial week of being in the History Society that they'll be going on a number of pub crawls, and he asked, well, when are we going to sit down and be a History Society? And they said, well, that is what the pub crawl's for. So he went on this litany of different pub movements, as I mentioned, crawls, spidering along and drinking and kind of asking questions about history, and finding that no one was really that interested in the history club about history. So this is what actually happens in society. It's like, oh, it's a big excuse to have drinks. It's hilarious, isn't it? Yeah, that very simple irony is so funny. An idiot. That's what I usually get as well, from because there was a society in UCD, and this I'm just mentioning it parallels somewhat with what I'm saying. That was its entire job was to pick up cans of Beamish and other beers that were left around UCD. Didn't last very long.
What's it called?
I think it was called like the Beer Pickup Society, but I'll happily be corrected by someone. They may be named after Heineken or some beer in particular, because the sponsorship would have been great for money.
Is it worth joining UCD for that?
For that, no.
There could be an
There's an easier way of doing it. Go throw drinks outside in your garden and pick them up.
I know.
And they had the same attitude, which is like, oh, we're a society, but we also drink. That's not funny. That's not enough of a reason to exist.
It's not exactly a rebellion either.
Yeah, it's not, because it's a very accepted. Like, look at Temple Bar at the moment. If you want to go drinking, there's plenty of places that call themselves typically Irish, O'Reilly, something name, like maybe it's Norman, just have a drink. There's so many places that do that.
Yeah, or the alternative hipster kind of catering ones
Yeah.
that do exactly the same thing. Sell the same drinks at the same price.
Yeah.
But it's a different atmosphere.
Oh, a completely different
It's all
atmosphere. It's still
marketing.
£5 for fucking
Yeah,
lager.
it's all marketing and branding. It's different packaging for cereal boxes.
But this place has mosaics, Connor, and it's all pretty and red. And hipsters go here.
And there are fountains.
Yeah, fountains. Like D2, it's the same thing. If you want to go have some, go to interesting places, go to D2. It's a club in the center of the floor that has a kind of a palladium approach because it's open market roof, so it looks like you can look at the Dublin sky. And then surrounding that area is a number of LCD TVs promoting the chicken wing deals and the burger deals you can get with the €2 drinks. And because the drinks are so cheap, you have people coming in off the street eating the food and taking the drinks because that's their dinner and their fun at the same time. It's horrendous. The current Irish services for fun and culture are neither, right? The only thing that comes out of it is the merriment of drink, and of course that's fun, but that's not enough of a criteria or a criterion to say this is culture in Dublin, this is what we can provide. It's shit. It's awful. I hate it. So of course, if something like the Exchange exists, I will happily carry the flag and fire the gun, although I'm an objective host, clearly, on this show. But you can see what I mean. I mean, taking, for example, that across the road from us we had, 3 pubs in a line? We had a hotel that was a pub hotel, no offense.
Wonderful neighbours.
Yeah, fantastic neighbours. They were very good to us.
They actually do like us.
The hotel was they were brilliant because we I should mention the Exchange fire alarm would go off a lot, and the criminal alarm both would go off at different times.
That's what's the fire alarm. It was more the security alarm.
Yeah,
if somebody was trying to shake the door open, or if it was a very windy night.
Yeah, and we'd have to check to see because the alarm company would ring, usually Connor, at any old time of the night.
Yep.
And he'd wake up and say, what? And they would say something along the lines of, there's an alarm going off, you need to check there's a criminal there. And the hotel next door would check. They would look in through the window because it's a gallery space you can see in, and they would tell us. So we had some great neighbours.
Yeah.
But also, what were they doing?
I'd say, like, the 3 pubs across the way from us, if the rest of Temple Bar was like that, it would be a much nicer place.
Yeah.
I feel like the pub more central in Temple Bar, it's more kind of focused and targeted towards selling the booze. Check-in and Turshead, they do at least have activity space.
And the check-in actually has activity focused around people from the Czech Republic and other Eastern European regions as well. Very, very good for band space and things. So I just want to mention check-in's fantastic. I really like them. But
so they do have dance and music events, and there is an element to it that is a bit more. It takes some of the focus away from drinking. Whereas a big concern with a lot of pubs is that they are simply, selling machines to get people to the bar, buy them a drink, and then at 3 a.m. they're running turf and running out of the street.
Yeah.
And that's not really, in any productive sense, a culture that you want to encourage. So you need to try and provide alternatives. And Exchange, in our own small way, we see ourselves as an alternative to that you can have cultural or social or artistic events without drinking in them, and that maybe that could be a more acceptable thing if a couple of other places were able to follow that as well.
Yeah. And also non-profit, just want to mention.
Yeah.
You can run these events for free.
Well, that makes it affordable.
Yes. Free is very affordable.
But affordable to run as well is so you don't have the staff that, bouncers. If you're going to sell drink, you need bouncers. So it immediately ups
The
your
license
costs.
is the worst part, actually.
Yeah, so you immediately up your costs if you're selling drink. So if you can have cultural or social or artistic spaces without the drink and without the license and without bouncers that you need to police people who are under the influence of a drug, the quantity of which they may not realise how much they've consumed or the effect it's going to have on them. If you can do all that, if you can do a social, cultural space without drink, that provides an alternative for people. I mean, I think sometimes in exchange, whenever groups are booking events, particularly gallery launch events, the assumption is, oh, we need to have wine glasses laid out and people need to be able to sip on something and feel sophisticated and classy.
But at the same time unwind with the merriment of drink because they
Yeah.
have to get a little bit pissed.
Yeah.
A little bit gee-eyed. Just a little bit, just a tad. Oh, did I say that?
Can we say
Oh, we can say anything. We can say, right? I mean, I can ask Jack. Jack, right? I can say anything on this show, can I? I can say anything on this show, can't we? It's alright, yeah. It's fucking great. Yeah. We can say anything.
Okay, cool.
I actually already knew, I just wanted him to say it.
Okay, cool. Well, no, that's out of the way. Fuck. No,
We still lose all of our caliber.
yeah, so a bit like that informality comes in with the language. Once people have realised that you don't need to drink to be informal and social with people.
Yeah.
Actually, the
Which
opposite.
really scares a lot of Irish people.
Initially, yes, but once you actually provide a space for it to happen without drink, people will realise that actually I can be informal and social without the booze. I don't need drink to get me to a point where I'm socially acceptable, or, you know, the
Yeah.
drink doesn't need to be a social lubricant.
Absolutely.
Actually, a convivial atmosphere will achieve that much better.
Yeah.
Much cheaper.
Warm
for
and
everyone there.
openness. A more socialised person will be that lubricant.
Yeah.
And that's when they realise they had a drinking problem and they leave the exchange and go to the nearest AA meeting. Because that's the problem, right? You are right that we need more of those spaces.
Yeah.
There is a high demand from them from the most silent fucking minority in the world.
That's the problem. People who don't come into town to socialise are the ones that kind of place will attract.
Yeah.
We currently have a market stacked towards a very polarised idea of what socialising and culture around socialising should be. It's stacked towards pubs, drink a lot, get pissed. There's a huge schism between the nighttime and daytime economies in Telebar and the city centre at large. And that's the problem, because ideally a city centre should be a much more welcoming, diverse, mixed-use space. And it should be possible for families to come into a city centre at night time and enjoy different things.
Yeah.
You can't do that where the atmosphere is geared towards drink and super pubs and mega clubs. And I suppose it's been described as some solution battle or one that we're never going to win, but taking the very realistic game of having a small place for culture to happen and people to not drink and have the choice of not drinking while enjoying culture and some sort of socialising around that. If we can do that within the exchange, that is a win, and that will provide encouragement to other people that the city centre is actually for a broader audience, and it can be a city centre that truly welcomes people into it at different hours than it currently does. Because
People who
at the
don't just need
moment-
an alcohol addiction.
well, people who don't just want to indulge and go into the excessive drinking that currently predominates too much of the atmosphere at the moment.
Yeah, but as I said, that they are a minority in a sense, in that we can't detect them, I suppose. So it's not really fair to say minority, but they're silent. They're the silent minority. We don't know, and I mean to take the term majority and reverse it here. I'm being deliberate. They are a minority. They're very silent. We can't get them to voice up or collect together in any group label or in any category. You can't categorize them in any sense that you can make market worthy to sell to people as an audience or to make people such as the area managers understand that this is a thing that people want, because it's too fringe. And it doesn't. It's not fringe because it's inherently weird. It's not at all. It's fringe because nobody knows how to articulate this yet. It's a dialogue that's only started to happen ever since a lot of cities like Berlin blew out with these kinds of models of businesses, small pop-up, run democratically and flat. It's very, very new. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint, isn't it? Not for what I'm going to say. I can easily speak. I mean, it's hard for anyone to pinpoint what this is. To say this open arts and culture space is something that everyone needs. And if you even do it at the exchange, there needs to be places like this. But to address people with that and not sound like you're a
Preaching.
You're just proselytizing. You're an anarchist prick. You're just some crazy anarchist Mongol type who's come in with this kind of raging angst for the system, which is not true at all. It's just, no, like, I love drinking as much as the next. Okay, that's not true. But we both have drank and gotten pissed, but we like drinking. It's not, we're not against necessarily drinking culture.
Yeah, you need to have a choice.
You do. You just, exactly. We need choices. And it's too focused right now. And look, it's great that you can have dance clubs inside of these little pubs and bars and you can say it's alternative, but it's still cloistered within the talking and within the rubric and within the model of drinking. And that's not necessarily culture. It's not even that it's not cultural, it's not culture. By definition.
Anti-culture.
Yeah, exactly. It's anti-culture.
It takes people away from thinking and expressing themselves.
And they come in cultural and they explode with the anti-culture and then they have to like resolve into a new state of a universe. So yes. We're gonna wind down shortly enough because it's coming towards 6, but it's been good. There's going to be a few more episodes of this. I'm hoping to have more people. Connor, you're going to be hopefully a constant presence because I'm going to need you here. But we're going to have, because it's a third microphone, I think next week we might have Tom or someone else in it, or maybe Jules or someone else in the exchange, and we'll get into more subjects on kind of how you guys are running and just, you know, maybe more the social aspect that I'll input myself, but with being able to bounce off two people, which would be great. Sure. So yeah, it's been educational, it's been emotional, it's been enlightening, all of those things that I just say and hope that everyone feels exactly the same way. But Connor, thanks very much for coming on the show, and thanks again to Radio Mate for hosting us. It's been great. So this was Silent Running with James Van Der Val and Connor McQuillan. See you again soon.
Thank you.